Thank you again for joining us today. I'm excited to talk about a very exciting and inspiring project that David Dixon and myself had a chance to work on with Ben Crowther from CNU, who's on the call, and then also to work with the City of Buffalo. Brandy Merriweather's on the call to provide insights from the city's perspective, and then also Lisa Kenny from the Regional Planning Agency within Buffalo, GBNRTC. I'm going to try and set the stage very quickly with a few slides. But here, it's kind of a theme that I think we're seeing throughout a lot of conversations happening at Urbanism Next, and also some of the work that David and I are working on as we're thinking about how to merge these next generation mobility solutions into different communities. And there's no one size all approach. Sorry about that. So kind of the overarching question with all this is, what does a future mobility ecosystem look like? I think that was kind of one of the things that inspired us to work with the City of Buffalo, and also to think about, what is the connection between land use and next generation mobility? One of the things that's been talked around a lot around this conference and just everywhere in general is, what does the word disruption mean? Unfortunately, it often has a negative connotation. I think with this report that you'll hopefully see in some of the findings is we try to turn it into more of a positive word. And with some of the recommendations and the policy framework that we talk about in the report, it's trying to think through how can we harness disruption in a positive way and really help it benefit the community as well. So I think I already said at the outset, but one thing you'll see in this report is that connection between emerging technologies and also merging mobility and land use, which I think is an important part of the conversation. And one thing within our smart mobility work at Stantec that we're really focused on is that it's more than just thinking about technology and deploying technology for technology's sake. It's also thinking about how do we innovate structures within how these technologies are going to operate from a governance perspective. And one of the best examples in my mind is land use, and thinking about zoning codes and thinking about ideas like something you'll see in the report is the idea of an equity and innovation inclusion zone. Thinking about where are these areas that we can deploy the innovation to test it, to learn from it, to achieve the community education and interaction, and then to continue to learn from it and reiterate it in different ways. And in getting ready for this presentation, and I think some words that we can think about maybe to frame the conversation is the word coordination, collaboration, community, and then continuity are four words that I came up with, just thinking about before we hopped on the call today. And I think the word continuity in my mind really thinks about how whatever we do isn't just a one-off project. It's thinking about how do we learn from whatever we do and then continue to iterate and make sure it grows and scaled up and fits a community as well, which I'm excited to talk about as well. And then these are some questions from another project we're working on, but I think it's funny how it melds, I think, into the report, and a lot of inspiration you see within the report. And I'm sure if you're coming at this from a city perspective or a regional perspective, some of the issues that you're thinking about as you think about how to move forward through the next generation of mobility, through the next generation of infrastructure, all these challenges in front of us. And in my mind, there's this opportunity to bring forward great groups like we worked around in Buffalo to bring together the community and to really provide the foundation for that collaboration that's going to be needed to move forward. So with that, I'm going to stop this introduction and go ahead and let Ben Crowther and go ahead and take it away of talk a little bit about how this project came about and some of the work that CNU is doing. So go ahead, Ben.
Oh, thanks, Greg. Let me go ahead and do the old screen share. Can we see that everything's looking good?
Looks good.
All right. Excellent. Yeah, so hello, everyone. I'm Ben Crowther. I'm the program manager for the Congress for the New Urbanism's transportation initiatives. And since 2016, CNU has been exploring how new transportation technologies, particularly autonomous vehicles, affect placemaking, walkability, and planning and development patterns of cities, towns, and regions. And so, like Greg said, I want to start today by providing some of the context for how the Future Mobility Workshop and report came about, as well as some context for the ongoing work that the city of Buffalo is doing today, and our panelists are going to tell you a bit more about. So the next transportation revolution, I think has been discussed, throughout this conference, one where vehicles will operate themselves, become a common mode, is going to affect more than just how we get around. It's going to reshape the way that cities operate and how they look. And we only have to look to the last transportation revolution and its results to see that. After World War II, the mass production of private automobiles marketed at a price that's affordable to the majority of Americans has enabled all sorts of changes to how we live, work, and build our cities, including Buffalo here, where we have it at the start of the interstate era in 1963. You can see the Skyway is starting to intrude upon downtown, and what we have today, it's created a lot of new opportunities, but it's also burdened communities with increasing traffic violence, the exclusive reliance on expensive automobiles to get around, environmental hazards, and places that frankly aren't designed for human beings. So the first question we asked is, can a new mobility revolution, one that we're expecting soon, change any of this? Can we keep some of the benefits while eliminating the negative effects of the previous mobility revolution? And so the answer perhaps is yes, if we pursue a vision like that that's set out in NACTO's blueprint for autonomous urbanism, which leverages new modes to put people first. But there's a hitch, however. A lot of the current testing of autonomous vehicles in real world settings doesn't strive for this vision. Instead, we get ongoing testing in places like Arizona here, Chandler, Arizona, which operates within the same paradigms laid out in the last transportation revolution. So single occupancy, wide roads, faster speeds. This is an approach that tests the technology first and considers the implications later. And that results in many of familiar consequences, congestion, traffic violence, and the perpetuation of streets designed for cars instead of people. If we continue implementing new transportation technologies in this way, we won't solve anything except to make single occupancy commutes like the one you see here more tolerable. So what's the way forward to get from where we are now to something like NACTO's vision for autonomous urbanism? CNU has partnered with Stantec's Urban Places in the city of Buffalo, New York, to create a roadmap for cities and towns that changes the paradigm for testing. It considers simultaneously the implementation of new transportation technologies, the built environments they'll operate in, and the people they'll serve. In February 2020, we got together for a 5-day public workshop in Buffalo where we built the foundations for the Future Mobility Report. At this workshop, our goals were twofold. First, we wanted to talk with Buffalo residents to hear from them about the mobility issues they faced and how they thought new technologies might solve these issues or maybe even make them worse. And second, we wanted to translate this input into actionable steps that the city of Buffalo could take in the realms of land use, street design, and transportation policy before these new technologies arrived. We learned a lot from our time in Buffalo and drew up a framework for a mobility and equity innovation zone for the city, which I'm sure we'll hear more about today. But before my fellow panelists talk about this, I want to outline briefly the principles that underpin the concept that we adopted after talking with community members about what they wanted from the next mobility revolution. To start, we were asked to fix the dumb stuff first, things that were spawned by the last transportation revolution that centers cars, not peoples. Things like intruding highways and wide streets that act as barriers to all other forms of mobility except cars. An overabundance of parking, much of which goes unused and leaves downtown a sea of asphalt. and lack of quality sidewalks, bus lanes, and bus shelters, the building blocks of multimodal choice. Second, we encountered a healthy dose of skepticism that simply putting a self-driving vehicle on streets would do anything to change the status quo that prioritizes cars. So one of our principles became center people in transportation, not the technology. In certain cases, some low-tech solutions are perfectly acceptable. One of the more common issues residents raised was the difficulty in assessing real-time information for Buffalo's bus system. And for that problem, several just wanted a basic fix. Have the transit authority add route numbers to the rear of all buses so riders could quickly determine which bus they just missed as it pulled away from the stop, a rather low-tech solution. And finally, in a similar vein, we heard high-tech solutions won't serve everyone, and that cities need to plan for people with the fewest resources. Identifying barriers to participation is the initial step towards accomplishing this. In the case of transportation technologies, the ownership of a smartphone and access to a data plan are common hurdles. So what solutions exist that don't put up obstacles like these? With principles like these three, why bother thinking about new transportation technologies at all? We think if they're implemented in ways that adhere to these principles, they have power. The power to unburden people from the costs of owning an automobile, whether through shared service or micromobility. The power to make public transit more effective and accessible, whether that's signal preemption or first last mile connections. And the power to bring better transportation choices to communities that have few reliable ones to begin with. These are the types of problems Buffalo and other cities like it are trying to solve. So I'll end there and turn it over to David Dixon to share why now is the right time to start incorporating these new technologies into cities.
I'm going to sort of just follow up on Ben's comments, and as he said, say why now is such a critical time, and for probably virtually any community in the US to start doing this thinking. Not just because new technologies are coming along, but because of fundamental demographic, economic, and other technological changes that are reshaping our communities. I was thinking when Ben showed the 1963 and today aerial shots of downtown Buffalo, we actually had a significant a new technology paradigm in the 50s and 60s. It was the universal access to private automobiles. And we let that technology change reshape our communities. Today, we have a chance, we have a new era of new technology paradigms headed our way and really rapidly. We have a chance to use these as powerful tools, not to reshape our communities for their needs, but to help us shape the kind of communities we want. And when Mayor Brown welcomed us to Buffalo in late February, as we heard about a pandemic that was happening in China, he said the first and most important thing that he wanted us out of these new mobility paradigms was to enhance opportunity, equity, and inclusion for all Buffalonians. Some of us really are benefiting from a knowledge economy. Many of us aren't. I actually still remember 2007, not that long ago, when a prominent urbanist who will go unnamed for the moment said, can Buffalo ever come back? He said, no, we should stop trying to subsidize their ability to stay there. He couldn't have been more wrong and more quickly. And that's because of great local leadership, which we got a chance to know and you'll hear from in a couple of cases, and also because of demographic and economic changes that really support not only the viability, but the ability to thrive, and maybe more than ever for terrific places like this. So let's start with the new norm. The new norm is clearly COVID has created a new norm, but it is in some ways accelerated much more fundamental trends. It's taught us how much more we love to walk around our communities, how much more we want access to nature. It has taught us the increased value of community when it's been harder to find, but it has also not changed the fundamental dynamics that were already beginning to bring Buffalo and many cities back and will increasingly over the next 2 decades. And it starts with economic development. So you'll hear me in a little bit talk about how we're having many few kids. This is not an anti-kid statement. I have kids and grandkids, but it is about a workforce that is growing much more slowly, just as the kinds of jobs that are growing increasingly require higher education, probably 90+% of the net new jobs for the next 20 years. Buffalo is working hard to attract, this means we have a shortage of these workers, though the general term is talent, working hard to attract this talent, because today jobs and investment follow this talent. They're already doing it to Buffalo, and they can increasingly as Buffalo unlocks its livability and appeal to these folks. But Buffalo has also figured out that each new knowledge job creates 5 jobs for other folks. So in fact, the way to equitable economic opportunity is to attract the economy that is actually growing, the knowledge economy. This economy, again, follows talent. This talent really likes living in urban, walkable, mixed-use places. Their downtown Buffalo and many of its neighborhoods are as cool as you could get in this day and age. What is fortuitous then is that we are also entering a period of dramatic demographic change, just as dramatic as the economic changes. We shift fully to a knowledge, or our growth fully to a knowledge economy. For the next 2 decades, 80+% of net new households will be singles and couples. These are households with largely without kids or single parents with kids. In fact, if you look and see, let me take a step back, these folks overwhelmingly prefer livable, mixed use, walkable, urban, lively, community-rich neighborhoods and downtowns. Again, think what Buffalo is rich in. They have a much lower preference for single-family suburbs, which is actually one reason why our better job economy, our knowledge economy has been moving into cities from suburbs, particularly for the last 10 years. And even with COVID, this trend is actually accelerating. If you look to see where these folks want to live, just take a look at the map in the lower right here. The darker the green, the faster the neighborhood is growing. It is the dense walkable neighborhoods and Buffalo's downtown that have been growing the last 10 years. Buffalo's overall growth has been flat, it's marginal. The city is probably doing a little bit better than the region at this point. But if you look at the change, the churn within this population, the number of singles and couples without kids is growing, and growing at an increasingly rapid rate, meaning that a flat population is supporting much stronger demand for downtown and its urban neighborhoods. So this is a very different world than the one that Ben sort of implicitly referred to when he brought us back to 1963. At that point, our growth was all households with kids. We had a rapidly growing middle class. So technological, that mobility paradigm unlocked the ability to open up suburbs for growth and to really shift us to a sprawl model of growth. Today, as we move toward new mobility paradigms, we have the exact reverse economy, reverse demographics. So by the early to mid 2030s, and remember the US auto fleet turns over roughly every 15 years, we will be in an era of connected mobility. Our cars can all talk to each other and probably what's around them. One impact of this is particularly relevant to unlocking the development potential of urban places, of downtowns and great urban neighborhoods. And that is the fact that by later in the 2020s, certainly early 2030s, a great many of us will not park our car when we go someplace. We will say to our car, go park yourself. We'll probably get out of it at the entrance to a parking garage. These cars will park themselves much more compactly than we do, which means that at this point today, we are probably at the point of peak parking demand in urban areas that particularly can share, where office and jobs and housing and retail can all share the same space when different people need them, which means that one of the major costs of urban development, competing with suburban development, which has been the need for structured as opposed to surface parking, is beginning to disappear. And it's very interesting. Buffalo, in its recent Green Code a couple of years ago, removed minimum parking requirements, a hugely progressive step, maybe even, well, it has turned out to be very even profoundly progressive, because if you look at new developments, particularly in downtown mixed-use developments, they are building roughly 50% of the parking that would have been required before the Green Code, because they're already taking advantage of shared parking, et cetera, decreasing the premium, the cost, the penalty for building downtown in an existing neighborhood. By the early 2040s, we'll be in the era of autonomous mobility. I co-edited a book with a colleague called Suburban Remix, and about a third of the way through writing it, we suddenly thought, oh my gosh, if we're headed towards autonomous mobility, does that mean everyone's going to jump in their Tesla and ride an hour and a half out to their country villa playing computer games? And that's when my good colleagues like Greg, who are really focused on this, pointed out the real future of autonomous mobility is probably going to be shared autonomous mobility, because our population growth, our demographics aren't, the housing market is growing, are not the folks who are going to want to live out in the country. They're the folks who are going to want to live in the city. And shared autonomous mobility can cut mobility costs for a typical household by 50%, if not more. It's much less expensive to share vehicles than to have to own your own. Plus, you have much more flexibility. And places with the density of people and destinations to support shared mobility, like downtown Buffalo and its great urban neighborhoods, and this is true of most of America's sort of post-industrial cities, are set up to really support shared mobility. And in a way, this creates yet another, literally, subsidy for urban living. And then, of course, we'll be able to live in a world where we won't be parking because we're in a shared vehicle, but even earlier than that, rather than go to a shop, we'll simply be dropped off, decreasing the cost of those trips and actually increasing by about tenfold the capacity of the number of folks who can shop along an urban block, because you're dropped off in 5 minutes, you run in and pick something up, a car is stuck there for an hour. I'm going to come back and talk about how we applied these thoughts to the Lower Main District adjacent to downtown. But first, I hand the floor to my terrific colleagues from Buffalo.
Yeah, now we'll hear from Lisa Kinney.
Great, thanks, Greg and David. Let me share my slides here. All right. Is that looking okay?
Yes.
All right, great. All right, so I'm Lisa Kinney. I'm the Smart Mobility Advisor with the Greater Buffalo Niagara Regional Transportation Council, which is our long name for our metropolitan planning organization. Some of you might know that pretty much every large metropolitan area in the US has an organization like us. We strictly deal with transportation planning and coordination among our members that you see here. Others, particularly on the West Coast, also do some land use planning, but we stick just to transportation. Give you an idea of where we're situated for those of you not familiar with Buffalo. So we're in New York State, or as you see on that map there, on the other side of New York State from New York City, actually on the Canadian border, so separated by water from Canada. Probably best known for our chicken wings or buffalo wings. Our Buffalo Bills football, I guess, for better or for worse. We do get snow. We do have Niagara Falls. So our region itself has about 1 million people. The city of Buffalo has right now about 250,000 people. That's down really from its heyday of possibly 800,000. And we'll talk a bit about what that means in terms of access infrastructure. So a lot of, let me get this going here. All right. So in our most recent regional transportation plan, moving forward 2050 that we put out, really the big theme there is technology and smart mobility. You see kind of the landscape here, and I noticed, I keep meaning to update this slide because even, we put this out with 2018, it's missing like e-bikes, e-scooters, probably some other things, but generally this was kind of the first introduction to the region, frankly, of some of these smart mobility concepts. We at the MPO see transportation as, not just a way of getting people and goods, to move around, but really as a means to meet goals related to the economy, to our communities, to the environment, with that innovation piece sort of woven throughout. And we do need to recognize too that, even just within our region, we have different types of places. So we've got some dense urban areas, but we've got rural areas and everything in between. And so, the way that technology is applied across these different areas doesn't necessarily look the same. So this is just some snapshots from that moving forward plan. What we tried to do is really, given that we're a planning agency, we don't own and operate any infrastructure. We don't run the buses. We don't fix the potholes, but really here to, set some vision and some guidance for our local municipalities. And so we wanted to actually, lay over some of these potential new technologies, new transportation modes over some existing roadways that people, might recognize in the region. Get a sense of, all right, well, what would, a variable speed signage look like? Where might we have, V2V, vehicle to vehicle communications? And what might this look like, on highways down to, maybe, suburban roadways and even at village centers. A big thing that we're really starting to see interest in is this idea of mobility hubs, which some of you probably know about, but this idea of physically bringing together multiple modes of transportation, as well as the data there to integrate things potentially all in one app where you can schedule and pay for multiple modes all at once. So part of our work is sort of setting that regional vision. Part of the work also is to educate the public as well as our member agencies and other transportation stakeholders. So we were lucky in 2019 now to be part of a series of workshops held across the world, and we were one of 4 held in the US that Arizona State University and a few other partners put together. And the idea here was to get a sense of what do regular people think about automated mobility? Are they afraid of it? Are they hopeful? What are their concerns? And then we can take that information and help inform how we start to plan things for the region. So this was on a Saturday in a hot room at the University of Buffalo campus. And I see these pictures now of like all these people, no mask, crowded into a room, which like kind of horrifies me, but hoping we can get back to something like this soon enough. But I see that I think Ben or David stole my picture here, but so we had a day-long session. These were just residents from across the region. We relied on some partner organizations to help recruit people. We even put ads in Craigslist, Facebook, and participants were paid for their time. So they got $100 for the day. And we had a really, I think, a diverse crew of people. So you see here, we had groups situated around tables. It was a mix of informative videos, group discussions, role playing, thinking about future scenarios, how stakeholders might be affected. And then at lunchtime, people who were able to could come and at least look inside an AV shuttle. This is an Ollie shuttle that the University of Buffalo is testing on its campus. It wasn't able to run because it doesn't actually know this section of campus, but at least people could kind of get that feel for what a shuttle might look like. And then we took that information from that public session and we held a follow-up session with some of the local transportation agencies and consultants and planners. We kind of gave them a report back of what we heard from the public and then even had them go through some of the same exercises. Again, continuing that education piece across a range of stakeholders. Some of the things we also do is put out a bi-weekly smart mobility newsletter. try to get a mix of some local things that might be happening in the region in New York State, as well as just to try and, keep tabs on this space. Anybody that follows anything in smart mobility knows that there's, companies coming and going like every week. So trying to keep tabs on things, again, just trying to get that information out there. And then actually just this morning, we held our first of 2 data business plan workshops. So we have a Federal Highway Administration helping us put together, kind of get a sense of, what sort of data do we have, mobility data in the region, who's got what format is it in, and then how might we start managing that to support some of these new technologies. So we'll have another workshop follow up next week, and then I think just continue that conversation with our stakeholders. So, some final thoughts, I think some opportunities to look at, as I think David mentioned, we're a shrinking to low growth region. We've got a lot of excess infrastructure. We're binational, which, I think in some ways is challenging, but also presents some opportunities. I always iterate and reiterate that we should be proactive and not reactive to these technologies. So, in some ways we didn't have scooters dumped on our sidewalks like some places. So we're lucky in that way, and that we can kind of learn from what worked in other places and what didn't work. And I also, really trying to hammer home the message of using technology to support our goals. It's not just there because it's like the cool new thing to do. But looking at, all right, well, what are we trying to do, and where does technology fit in to support that? And always having equity, at the center. Brandy will talk a bit more about that from the city's perspective, but looking at racial equity, socioeconomic and abilities in anything that we're doing. Again, continuing the education outreach piece. And then as we kind of see, street improvement projects, corridor studies come up on our radar, we look at, where might it make sense to, start either piloting or implementing some of this technology. We're lucky to have the University of Buffalo here with their AV shuttle. So we're trying to be able to get that actually out on the street to do a bit of a test bed project. Now that e-bikes, e-scooters are legal in New York State, also trying to get some pilots going with that with some partner agencies. And then looking at, so how can we repurpose some of this excess infrastructure that we've got? And then I think like David mentioned, and as most regions and cities are looking at what are we doing, with and post COVID? What are some of these things that we saw, open streets, more people out, biking, walking? How can we, have those kind of stick around once we're out of this thing? So with that, I'll wrap it up as my contact information there. Happy to talk more. You can check out our website as well. And I think with that, I will stop sharing and send it over to Brandy from the City of Buffalo.
Thank you so much, Lisa. And thank you guys for having me. I'm going to try to quickly share my screen here. And hopefully, are you guys able to see it?
Yep, looks good.
Okay, awesome. Okay. So again, my name is Brandy Merriweather. I am Vice President of Downtown Development with the Buffalo Urban Development Corporation. We're a city not-for-profit economic development corporation chaired by Mayor Byron Brown. I'm going to talk a little bit about our Race for Place initiative that really ties in nicely with a lot of what was discussed by my other colleagues here on the panel today. Race for Place really focuses around placing resources around improving the public realm and what I like to call humanizing public spaces. So it's really about taking a lot of the development that we're seeing inside of buildings and having that experience translate out onto the street in ways that connect people and ways that connect neighborhoods, support businesses, promote walkability, access, and that basically create a good experience for people. So that's really the overall gist of it. And a big component of this is using this initiative as a tool to attract talent and also new entrepreneurs. So again, we really are focused around public and private partnerships. So joining forces, joining public sector dollars and pairing those with public or private sector dollars, as well as foundations and others, to really be able to maximize our ability to achieve a higher level of infrastructure and a public realm experience. A big piece of this also is getting a little bit more innovative in how we engage people in this planning process. So a big part of Race for Place is reaching those end users, reaching the folks that are actually going to be using the spaces, and really trying to get an idea of, what things they would like to see, what quality of life issues are they trying to solve, what employment opportunities are they trying to access, what mobility challenges are they having, and how we can utilize technology. And I think Lisa mentioned this on one of her last slides. How do we basically take the technology and use it to help regular people achieve their goals, as opposed to the other way around? So we're trying to address, again, I think David really laid this out really nicely, and in his talk earlier, holes in the urban fabric. So, we obviously see that our previous mobility revolution, if that's what you want to call it, when we introduced cars, really left a lot of holes, or I call them missing teeth sometimes, in our urban walkable experience. You have these, large gaps where you have massive amounts of surface parking, which a lot of times is underutilized and really disconnects that walkable experience that you may have. So we're looking at trying to introduce various modes of mobility to help to try to free up some of that space for developments and activities and things that basically would provide a higher level of an end use. Streetscape, obviously, placemaking and public realm enhancements. We're really trying to take our downtown from a place where we just have redeveloped historic buildings, but how do we kind of bring in those additional amenities to really make it feel more of a neighborhood, especially with we have a occupancy rate with respect to residential housing in downtown that's about 96%. So there's a very, very high demand for folks who want to live downtown, and now we're trying to kind of bring in those extra pieces that create a cohesive neighborhood. Again, diversity is a big piece, a big component of Race for Place. Again, really trying to focus around, what is that experience that people are feeling when they're in downtown? What kind of music do they hear? What do they see? What do they smell? What other people are out on the street for them to kind of connect with? So that's a major component. Smart cities technology is also another tool that we're looking to integrate into our public realm and into our infrastructure, and obviously public and private partnerships and kind of joining forces with other partners is also a key component. One major project that really helped to make a big splash and accelerate this Race for Place effort was the recent announcement. Well, actually, it was in 2020 that M&T made with respect to a technology and innovation hub at One Seneca Tower, which is the photo that you see here in the video. I'm sorry, in my slide here. This property actually had been vacant for several years. It's almost 1 million square feet of underutilized office space that was right smack dab in the middle of our central business district and our waterfront area. Douglas Development recently purchased it and is really transforming this property into a mixed-use development. So again, M&T is now housed there. They're going to be doing a major talent attraction initiative. Also 43 North is another entity that's really focused on entrepreneurship. And there's been so many other businesses and kind of wraparound services that have also set up shop in and around the area, really trying to create a technology ecosystem and an ecosystem that is conducive for entrepreneurship and new talent as well. Through this initiative, we've also been able to partner with Douglas Development on creating the Accelerator Fund. Douglas Development, they actually agreed to forego a tax abatement. And that funding was paired with some city funding where we combine that together for the Accelerator Fund, which is $40 million to jumpstart some of the improvements that we're looking to see through Race for Place. So that's been a very, very exciting a partnership that really came out of the Race for Place initiative. Again, I talked about smart cities technology. For us, we're really looking at this as a way to improve the quality of life for people in the city of Buffalo, also looking to improve the efficiency of the city so that we are better equipped to create that experience, that walkable public realm experience that so many of the individuals that David referenced on his during his talk are looking for, especially when they're looking to move into or work or visit downtown Buffalo. Some of the outcomes from the mobility report that the city, Mayor Brown has already rolled out this past December is one of them was a request for proposals for transportation demand management. One of the unfortunate, I guess, if you want to call it that, outcomes with the previous mobility revolution, Buffalo's really was really a car focused, a car centric town. Our transportation demand entity that manages just parking ramps and parking within the city of Buffalo. The city has issued an RFP for them to kind of bring on partners to look at transportation demand management more holistically. So not just looking at TDM or managing parking, but how do we integrate some of those other mobility options into that as well. This is just a quick rendering, I guess, of some visioning work that we have done through Race for Place. And really it looks to, again, I can't stress this enough, the whole people first, normalizing having a human experience and how infrastructure can be so fun. I know it doesn't seem like it, but it can really help us to achieve so many of our goals that may not be at the forefront of our mind, but really a lot of the focus that we've been putting into Race for Place is better connecting into the neighborhoods. We have very, very diverse neighborhoods on the east and west sides of our downtown area. So better connecting into those neighborhoods, better connecting folks to opportunities. We're also trying to integrate more color and art into the public realm. So that's a big component. Vibrancy, and also really focusing on that multimodal experience so that we can really start to free up some of that parking space for better and higher end uses. And connectivity has been a big piece of this as well. And when I say connectivity, I'm talking about connecting people to one another. I'm talking about connecting investment areas, stitching those together so that you have a cohesive, walkable downtown experience, and also connecting people to opportunities, to the employment zone, to a lot of the services and educational institutions, healthcare institutions, and things of that nature that are really clustered in our downtown area to help us to achieve higher equity as well. So that's all woven in through our Race for Place initiative. And I think the Future of Mobility report does a really, really incredible job of outlining how we can use mobility and infrastructure to help better achieve our goals as a city. These are a couple of concepts that we've worked through to try to mitigate infrastructure barriers. Obviously, a lot of highways and underpasses and things of that nature that aren't really fit for a human walkable experience are, we're kind of left with a lot of those from the previous automobile revolution. So also looking at ways to mitigate some of those barriers, using lighting, using artistic art elements to try to better connect our places within the downtown area. These are a couple of other concepts that we're working on as well, just utilizing lighting to create a better walkable experience beneath some of those infrastructure barriers. And when I also talk about mitigating barriers, one of the other things we're looking to do is to mitigate barriers for minorities, to enter into small business ventures. We have an initiative, it's a pop-up retail initiative we launched several years ago. It's called Queen City Pop-Up. We really want to make sure that we're also utilizing this infrastructure to connect to the business community. 80% of the participants in our program are women-owned businesses or minority-owned businesses, and they have an opportunity to set up shop in downtown for a test run. They get 2 to 3 months rent-free to test out their concepts. We do on-site technical assistance, things of that nature with them to encourage them to set up small businesses in downtown. These are a couple of the small businesses that we've worked with. Our previous cycles have been on a hiatus because of COVID, but right now we're actually exploring some outdoor concepts and really trying to tie those into a lot of the public realm work that we've been doing as well. So really just trying to mitigate barriers all around so that we can achieve higher equity and a more vibrant and diverse experience within our downtown area. So I'm gonna try to wrap it up. I know I can go on and on when I get on my infrastructure soapbox, my infrastructure kick. But again, these are just a lot of the goals. This is big picture, mixed income housing, accessibility, talent attraction, using technology to help us meet our goals, and really utilizing mobility as a way to improve our city and to really put Buffalo on the map from a regional perspective, from an investment perspective, and also to support the investments that have already been made in our city. And again, I want to just thank the team who worked on this Future of Mobility report with us. It really, really, I think, is going to be a key component in helping Buffalo to move forward into the next phase of our mobility revolution, as we like to call it. So I'll wrap up with that. This is the website with some information on Race for Place, and the contact at Race for Place is AKA Brandy Merriweather. So if you send a note there, if you're interested in some more information, it's basically going to come to me. So, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys may have. So check out that website if you have an opportunity. And with that, I'll wrap up and turn it back over to Greg. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Brandy. And then we'll let David wrap things up with some additional discussion and recommendations from the report.
Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. So Greg has ever so graciously told me to do this quickly, so we have time for some questions. So I'm going to speak in headlines. So Mayor Brown and the good folks of Buffalo asked CNU and Stantec Urban Places to work with a broadly, highly diverse group of terrific community folks who joined us for a week at a planning charrette to look at how to put people first as Buffalo unlocks the development potential of an area called Lower Main right next to downtown. It was an area, I'm going to speak in headlines here, but largely cleared for urban renewal. So this started with equity. And that meant that we said, as if we use mobility to open this area up to attract investment and talent and the jobs that follow and all those good things, that we were going to make sure that at least 30% of the housing was affordable to a wide spectrum of folks, and that and because we were really creating a situation that was going to invite in the innovation economy, that we had really robust workforce readiness and job training programs to unlock access to the innovation economy, to economic opportunity, to the full spectrum of Buffalonians. I love that term. So that meant that we couldn't just do a plan, and we couldn't just put these programs in place. We had to make sure folks had access, but we also had to do something else. We had to say, look, a lot of development doesn't yet pencil out in Buffalo if we have robust public-private partnerships, and Buffalo really began to come back when the historic tax credits helped bring a lot of state and federal money into rebuilding downtown, then we can really unlock the potential that I'm going to talk about. So we had to put that in place, equity in place, public-private partnership in place, and then we could say, so let's say we connected first downtown and Lower Main with an autonomous shuttle. That technology is available today. And when you don't have a driver, you got to find another job for that driver. You pull about half the cost out of operating it. So it can have frequent headways, be highly convenient. Ultimately, we could extend it to the other centers of Buffalo's innovation economy, but that creates a corridor that connects the Lower Main directly to the heart of downtown. And then we could say most transportation related development impacts happen within a 5-minute walk. But let's say we very tightly focus a lot of redevelopment sources, public-private partnership dollars along this corridor. You'll see the green rounded corner rectangle, and really look to bring back development there quickly. And at the same time, you'll see the blue arrow at the bottom of the slide. Let's connect this mobility system, this autonomous mobility system, to Buffalo's east side, which is where a lot of lower income folks live, folks who have not been able to enter the new opportunity economy, and make sure they have physical access as well as job training and other things that connect them with this opportunity. And then let's think about all those great folks that Randy talked about, entrepreneurs who want to start really cool businesses. Let's take this development corridor, turn it into an amenity corridor full of all the great new businesses that folks who have been challenged to start businesses want to start, to really bring life to the street, and in turn attract more folks to want to live and work and play here. Ultimately, with all these places, these pieces in place, we can create a terrific new downtown urban innovation neighborhood. And again, remembering that significant chunks of the investment coming in here need to be investment, not just unlocking an economy and creating a place folks want to live, but and folks of all incomes, but making sure that we take advantage, in this case, of a terrific community college already located in Lower Main, to make sure that folks have the training and the other things they need to have access to this new economy. And at this point, you know what? I think I'm going to let you all download the report to read the recommendations and leave a little time for questions. Otherwise, we want to hear from you. So thanks.
Thanks, David. So we already have one question, which I thought was interesting, towards Lisa and Brandy. The question is, how responsive is the new transportation plan to providing transportation options to some of the most difficult to serve? For example, older adults, lower income, people that don't live in transit-rich areas. And if this, I think this has been an ongoing problem with a lot of communities. And so how is now different towards maybe being able to meet those needs? Lisa, do you want to start?
Sure. And I think the nuts and bolts of it really gets down to prioritization, right? So, we've got our chunk of money, and we've got the projects that we want to do, and guess which one we don't always have enough of, right? The money side. So we've got to be able to prioritize what we want to do, but we don't have things in there related to equity in terms of metrics of how we're prioritizing things, then we're just going to be back to where we once were. So I think by ensuring that equity is in that conversation and is in that matrix of prioritizing projects, speaking from the metropolitan planning organization side of things, I mean, that's sort of the nuts and bolts of how we would do it. So, it's on that prioritization side of things. And then I think Brandy on the programming side, possibly the Race for Place, I think has some opportunities as well.
Yep, absolutely. I know a lot of the mayor's focus and priorities really starts with the equity component. So you kind of start with that and build from it. The city, I'm currently working with the city on a number of different initiatives that really look to mitigate barrier effects from infrastructure that was put in place years ago, looking at things from an environmental justice lens, looking to try to also mitigate barriers to broadband and things of that nature, looking at complete streets initiatives where, any infrastructure project that gets built within the city of Buffalo has to also consider other modes of transportation, traffic calming, all of that, safety, So that's definitely been a priority for the city and continues to be a priority through the Race for Place initiative. Also, when you get into just connecting the core of our central business district, better connecting that to the adjoining neighborhoods, which are two of the most diverse neighborhoods in the city of Buffalo in general. So all of that is a priority, and that it definitely factors into how we opt to invest in infrastructure in the public realm.
Great. And maybe, I think we have time for one more, so I think this will go to everybody. But we had somebody ask about road diets, which is my new favorite word right now, but this is something that we had talked about as part of our planning call. But with Secretary Pete, we're hearing a lot of conversation around new approaches to infrastructure investment, things like fix it first, things like road diets. And so, how do we move forward with ideas like that while managing user expectations on roadways? I think we put forward a lot of really interesting ideas, but people still expect to be able to drive a car tomorrow. All that's not going to change overnight. So how's the new thinking around a mobility paradigm, pairing it with some of the conversation around infrastructure, maybe provide an opportunity? So maybe I'll start with Lisa, and then I would love to hear David's thoughts on that.
Yeah, and I mentioned I have pictures there. Anyone that's familiar with any Rust Belt city, we were built for a much larger population, right? So we've got lots of pavement, lots of concrete to deal with, and so I think being deliberate in terms of how we're looking at repurposing some of those things, whether that means decommissioning them entirely. We're seeing highways being decommissioned across the country. But there, rightfully so, I think there is a concern among residents that like we've got potholes in the streets, our sidewalks are chewed up, we've got aging infrastructure. They take a beating over the winters here, right? So why are you doing this crazy tech stuff, in downtown? Like, why should I care? And I really say it's not an either or thing. It's not a zero sum situation. It's getting that, like Ben said, that dumb stuff done first and having that be a priority, and then figuring out, all right, what sort of technology works in order to meet the goals that the city has about, workforce access to opportunities, and not going after that technology just because it looks real cool in a drawing. Brandy, if you want to take it from there.
Yeah, the other thing I would add to that too, Lisa, is just the fact of the matter is these technologies can be used to solve a lot of those problems. And I think sometimes when people hear technology, and I used to be one of those people, when I heard technology in my mind, I thought it was going to be like drones, like flying through, and like robots, like walking up to me, asking me questions and things like that. When you really get down to it, a lot of these technologies help the city with efficiency and maintenance, and smart trash pickup, lighting levels, all those things that I think maybe folks don't necessarily think of when they think of like fix the dumb stuff. They can help us to fix those things. And I think also a big part of it is education. A lot of times, if you just sit down and have conversations with people and bring different people or more of the different groups of people to the table to engage them in these conversations, I think people understand slowing down traffic helps small businesses. You know what I mean? It helps people to stop, to be able to even see what shops and restaurants and things are there. It creates environments where people linger in places longer and ultimately spend more money and patronize those businesses. So it's really just kind of breaking it down from this high level kind of tech concept into ways that help people and improve their quality of life on a day-to-day basis. So I think that's, for me, what's so fun about it. I never was a big infrastructure person. When I got in economic development like 10 years ago, I'm like, oh my God, here we keep talking about infrastructure. I love infrastructure. Infrastructure is fun. It really can be fun. And I'm sorry. Go ahead, David. I think that's my long and short.
I'm sorry. On that note, I'm going to move completely away from infrastructure because somebody luckily loves it. So I'm going to be very pragmatic. We work with a terrific housing analyst named Lori Volk, who talks about in the 1990s, if you went out and asked people what they based housing choices around, access to a highway was at the top of the list. You ask them in 2020, access to a highway isn't even on the list, nor are golf courses or big backyards. It's about walkability. It's about main streets, walkability and main streets, and sense of community. And so if you want to attract people to live in your city, to work in your city, to pay taxes in your city, no longer are we dependent on bringing people into the city and making it easier for them to get here. We are dependent on making the city as wonderful a place as we can to live and work. And how should I say it? Narrowing streets or street diets is part of a toolbox. But remember, put that together with robust public-private partnerships and equity programs and all the other pieces. And then I can't help but closing on the fact that we are moving into an era of rapidly unfolding, changing mobility paradigms. Right now, it's much more about shared mobility. But as we move into the 2020s and early 2030s, it will be about connected mobility. Cars that talk to each other can drive 6 inches apart from each other and they don't bump into each other, meaning we are simply not going to. Within a little more than a decade, it'll begin to be increasingly obvious we simply don't need the street right of way we have. I'm sorry, one more fact. Streets represent 80% of the publicly owned space in most cities. That's public space. If you want to, we all talk about investing in parks and more green space and access to nature. The most impactful way we can bring open space and public space and life to people is by turning our streets into places for people. And diets are part of that. Thank you.
And David, to your point, I think this interim period is going to be really interesting. We at CNU did some work with a county down in Florida around an autonomous shuttle, and they had a very constrained right of way. And so the planners in that county thought, the shuttle's moving at roughly 15 miles an hour. That's probably below most car speeds, although the street's very congested, so that's not truly the case here. But their initial thought is, well, 15 miles an hour, where do we put it? We put it in the shared use path, right? Because it's traveling at roughly a bike lane speed. And so, one of the interesting things in working with Buffalo and Buffalo's downtown is, I think, and you all can correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of your streets have a 66-foot right of way downtown, and a lot of them have in the low tens of thousands of daily traffic count. So there's a lot of opportunity to test that interim period. And you can take away a lane and you're not going to cause Carmageddon or anything like that. And that's why I think, it's really a great opportunity to look at, this for all sort of Rust Belt cities, not just Buffalo. What can we do with this excess space that we have while still working towards, implementing things that are coming our way, probably regardless.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone. Thanks for everybody that joined us. And thank you to our panelists, and thank you to Urbanism Next. And we look forward to continuing the discussion at another conference near you. So in the meantime, stay well, stay safe, and have a nice weekend.
Thank you.